Everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Tony Payan. I'm the director of the Center for the United States and Mexico at Rice University's Baker Institute for Public Policy. It is my distinct pleasure to welcome you to the halls of the Institute this morning. As we are about to engage in this conversation with our distinguished guest, Governor of the State of Tamaulipas, Francisco Garcia Cabeza de Vaca, I want to reflect on the importance of this conversation. I met Governor Garcia Cabeza de Vaca about 3 years ago when he called on many of us, students of public safety and security in Mexico, to aid in advising him to tackle that very issue in his home state. I gladly accepted to become part of that advisory commission because I believe in using our research and our knowledge to help in the production of good and effective governance. And this invitation was also a challenge to look more closely at one of the most paradoxical and challenging cases for the rule of law in Mexico, the state of Tamaulipas. Few other states, in fact, are as representative of the enormous opportunities and the massive challenges that Mexico faces today and into the future. Let me focus first for a minute on the opportunities that Tamaulipas offers. The state of Tamaulipas is nestled in the northeast corner of Mexico, right up against Texas. As such, its connections to Texas run deep, historically, culturally, and economically, and have done so for a very long time. Tamaulipas is home to 18 ports of entry and the largest land port in the Americas, Nuevo Laredo, Tamaulipas, Laredo, Texas, through which 40% of all the binational trade flows. It is also home to one of the most important seaports in Mexico, Tampico, Altamira. In addition, Tamaulipas is the location of the richest known shale reserves in Mexico, excuse me, and has 400 kilometers of coastline facing the enormous amounts of oil reserves that Mexico still has in the Gulf. Similarly, Tamaulipas is both an agricultural as well as an industrial state, with one of the highest levels of human development in Mexico. With all these natural, geographical, and resource advantages, Tamaulipas, however, is also a very complicated state. Organized crime has long had a presence in that state and continues to present a challenge to both the federal and the state government, as well as many different communities throughout the state. It is also the path to the shortest route for many undocumented immigrants and refugee seekers who travel from southern Mexico to the United States, creating multiple opportunities for the victimization of immigrants and by unscrupulous human smugglers. And it is also a place that has long been neglected by former corrupt leaders of the state. And yet, Tamaulipas, and I can attest to that, has made enormous progress under the leadership of Governor Garcia Cabeza de Vaca, the first opposition governor in the modern history of the state. He has taken on these challenges with great enthusiasm and availing himself of the best minds he can get his hands on. And the statistics today show it. For all these reasons, it is truly a privilege and a pleasure to welcome the Governor of Tamaulipas to the halls of the Baker Institute. He will address how he is leveraging the state's comparative advantages and tackling some of the most difficult problems that not just the state, but the country face today. And this is even more important for all of us who make Texas our home. If those states in Mexico that border Texas prosper and gain increased stability and governance, you can be sure that Texas is better off. So, without further ado, let me cede the microphone to the governor. He will share his thoughts and ideas and plans with us. And then we will engage him in a candid conversation on what he is trying to accomplish in his home state. Please help me welcome Governor Garcia Cabeza de Vaca. Welcome.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. It gives me a great pleasure to be here this morning, especially here at Rice University, one of my favorite Texas cities. There's much going on in this town. I'm very happy to be here with you this morning. Let me tell you something a little bit about me. I went to school here in Houston, not to Rice, I wish, but I went to HBU, Houston Baptist University. I'm really proud of it. I was in the soccer team. I had a soccer scholarship, so I know the area. I would like to thank Tony Payan, Director of the Center of the United States Mexico, here at the Baker Institute for the Public Policy, and his invitation to be here with you today talking about my home state, Tamaulipas. So thank you, Tony. Thank you, and I hope you visit us soon in Tamaulipas. Texas and Tamaulipas share more than a border. The area between the both states is a major hemisphere economic engine, consisting of hundreds of miles of shared border, 18 border crossings, including 2 rail bridges. Frankly, nearly 60% of all the NAFTA or the USMCA trade between Mexico and the United States flow through Texas and Tamaulipas. And let me just mention this. Close to $1 billion of commerce go through our borders every single day between Texas and Tamaulipas. The state of Tamaulipas has recognized as the main commerce bridge to Mexico due to the exchange of goods through these port of entries, as well as its prime seaports that allow a vast maritime exchange. Through these logistics networks and those in the neighboring states, the northeastern region of Mexico, consisting of Nuevo León, Coahuila, and Tamaulipas, together we're a population of over 12 million people and represent 10.6% of the national industrial production, generating a big influence in the central and Bajío region that represents the 28% of the Mexico's wealth. Trade between Texas and Tamaulipas amounted almost $239 billion in the year 2018, representing 41.2% of all the Mexican international trade by highway and 56.4% by railway. And let's talk a little bit about the security issues. When I took over the state a little over 3 years ago, things were not what they are today. In fact, it was a long way from what it is today. To maintain the economic growth of the state, I implemented a proactive security strategy to instill consumers and investors' confidence that had reduced the crime by 2/3 in the past 3 years. Today, Tamaulipas has been singled out as the third out of 32 Mexican states with the best security performance in 2019, with substantial advantages in fighting crime. The proactive change in strategy, together with most ambitious institutional reform of the justice and security institutions with the states, have given the massive gain to anti-corruption effects, to include lowering crime indices and trends that have not been seen in Tamaulipas in recent years. And let me talk about one campaign that has never been done in the history between Mexico and the United States. Tamaulipas is probably the first state in the history that worked together with 7 agencies, federal agencies in the United States. What we realized is that the crimes, the organized crime, they don't respect the border. They don't respect the Rio Grande River. They work and go back and forth. They do crime in one side and live in the other side. And that has been affecting us for a long time. So what I did is I talked to different agencies and I told them, hey, we need to share information. We need to go after those targets. And what we did is we point out all those criminals that have given us a lot of trouble, part of the cartels, and we put a picture of all of them in the billboards, right on the bridges. And guess what? We put a 1-800 number. And it worked. You know, people started to help us. They would see these guys and they would call to this 800 number. And so far, we have caught 8 out of the 10 most wanted criminals in the border between Texas and Tamaulipas. This campaign was called Campaña de Seguridad y Prosperidad, Campaign for Security and Prosperity, with the committed support of our law enforcement partners within Homeland Security and related federal agencies, establishing an international public hotline and intelligence sharing campaign. Like I mentioned, 8 out of the 10 priority targets have been already apprehended. For the first time in more than a decade, Tamaulipas' rate of homicides is below the national average, enjoying better public safety records than states like Querétaro in Mexico or Louisiana in the United States. That's true. The numbers are right there. They're official numbers. They're not my numbers, official numbers. There's still much to be done, but with a strong will and support of our allies and partners on both sides of the border, the new Tamaulipas is turning a new leaf, and the numbers prove it. And let's talk also about the economic situation. Given the geographic conditions of Texas and Tamaulipas, working on consolidating a state port development master plan by synergizing and complements with the federal port of Altamira and with the ports of Texas, in which the ports of Tamaulipas become a safe and efficient alternative for a North American cargo. Nowadays, the port development of the state concentrates in Altamira and Tampico, as Tony you just mentioned. However, the basis for development exists also in the port of Matamoros, which is the closest one to the United States, a few miles from Brownsville, the northeastern corner of the state. The Altamira Port services 42 shipping companies, trading cargo within more than 120 seaports worldwide, and handling containers, cars, agriculture, raw materials, minerals, fluids, and natural gas. With 17 meters of water depth dipped in its main canal, Altamira is currently the deepest harbor on the Mexican East Coast. This makes it the most competitive, allowing its terminals to be safe and for large vessels to come in. This amounts to enormous growth potential due to its large territory reserve and its excellence and privileged geographic location. It's currently positioned as the harbor with the greatest growth prospect in the Gulf of Mexico. Broken down by activities nationwide, Altamira is the first port in the movement of liquids for the petrochemical industry, second place in the car transport, fourth place in containers handling, making it one of the 4 most important ports in the country. The state-run integrated port administration project in Altamira is one of the challenges that I would like to present here in Texas in order to invite Texas companies to consider an investment in our state port. The priority that we'll give into this port is of an energy hub, where enterprises from the petrochemical industry, hydrocarbon storage, energy generators, and other industries will, with the energy vocation, can be established so they can take advantages of its unbeatable location in the Gulf of Mexico. And talking about the energy hub, The energy potential of Tamaulipas includes alternative sources, which allows for sustainable development. In order to explore its energy potential, Tamaulipas has the objective of attracting investment in exploration and exploitation and production of various energy sources, as well as the integration of supply chain and support investments such as mechanical and multi-services industries. The technical capacities and the energy resources are assets in the national energy platform competition. The main challenge is to support a vigorous economic development while keeping sustainable and responsible stewardship of our environment and natural resources. Taking advantage of Tamaulipas' natural conditions, the state government is implementing several measures and actions in order to detonate the potential of the energy and the industrial services sector, promoting investment projects and programs in strategic sectors to elevate the state productivity that in turn will enrich the welfare of the whole region. Altamira already has one of the most important petrochemical clusters in the country, which produces 72% of the thermoplastic resins nationwide, having a privileged location and direct access to raw materials and logistics for the national and international shipping of the production. Part of this potential resides in its capability to establish a large storage system for hydrocarbons coming from deep and shallow waters production. And you all probably know, obviously, about the Eagle Ford shale area in South Texas. Well, that one doesn't stop at the waters of the Rio Grande River. It comes all the way to Mexico. And guess what? It's in Tamaulipas. In the same way, the oil storage infrastructure is located at a strategic point for its distribution in the central and Bajío regions in Mexico. The planned and under construction, which is this very important highway that we're constructing right now. It's called the Ciudad Mante Ocampo Tula Highway. This project will reduce travel time up to 60 minutes to connect Mexico Central region with Altamira's port. This will be another attraction as a boom of the region. Well, what is going on is that the Bahia area, which are the states of Querétaro, Aguascalientes, San Luis Potosí, and Guanajuato, there's where all the car industry manufacturers. The thing is that by building this road, they're going to save a lot of time and money and logistic area by going all the way to this seaport, which is located in Altamira. So most of these companies, they are just waiting for us to finish this railroad in order to use it. The Ciudad Mante Ocampo Tula, where I was telling you about, is 100% funded by the state government, which proves the financial strength of the state of Tamaulipas. The potential of Altamira's power plant could supply 6% of the national electric demand. Natural gas generation projects will find a friendly investment environment, having a high demand users with the industrial companies within the port and the surrounding municipalities. The largest established consumer belong to the steel industry, mining, and metallurgical industry, construction, and transformation industry. I want to highlight the access to the Texas Tuxpan gas pipeline. This is the new pipeline that was built in the sea that comes from Brownsville all the way to Altamira and then to Veracruz. With this branch, especially dedicated to deliver natural gas in Altamira, this pipeline has 40% of the importation capacity to the Mexican delivery system, allowing it to meet the growing demand. Altamira, the port of Altamira is placed with its location where it has gas, railroad, highways, local markets, logistics demands, highly educated human resources, and tourism attractions. There's no question that for Mexico, it is the port for the future, and we want the Texas companies to join us. The government of Tamaulipas seeks to promote and realize strategic programs, projects, and actions with the active involvement of both the public and the private sector, triggering the development of different regions and ports within the state in order to enhance and expand our economic and social infrastructure. To achieve this, the state has taken several strategic steps, such as the establishment of the Tamaulipas Energy Commission. This is the first state in Mexico that has established an energy commission by its own that regulates many of the actions and it promotes and helps out all the companies that are being established in Tamaulipas, whose mandate is to set the policies, strategies, and guidelines that will help mature a non-renewable energy sector, develop clean energies, and promote intermodal logistic projects for the port operation of the state. The creation of 2 state-owned enterprises, TAM Energy Alianza, aimed for the development of energy sector projects, and Promotora para el Desarrollo de Tamaulipas, PRODETAM. These both are companies focused on the development of logistic, tourism, business, a high economic and social impact infrastructure projects. Both can enter into various kind of partnerships and deliver public infrastructure bids, contracts, and appropriations, including the implements and the development. The establishment of a state master trust fund for the sustainable energy development has been approved by the state Congress in order to guarantee a long-term financial support and legal certainty for investors. This will assure the long-term vocation and success of providing the necessary institutional protection against the political changes in the federal government. Within this framework, the state has set up the table for a consolidation of the Texas-Tamaulipas economic corridor. The Tamaulipas Energy Strategy is a new and innovative approach to the types of roles that the local government can play. The model conceives the local government not only as the last mile authority, but also as a partner in a wide range of private-public partnerships. Given the uncertainties generated by the current federal government's policies, the local government active promoting can trigger private projects in the short term. We're not gonna be waiting for anyone or asking permission to work with the private sector, especially with the companies that are interested in investing in Tamaulipas. Our strategy implies that the local government can participate as a partner on the investments, including equity, land, and sovereign debt. Our specialized energy agencies and companies are legally able to offer sustainable incentives, such as a grant expectation in local taxes. In other words, tax incentives. The center of our strategy is to develop infrastructure in broadest sense of the term in order to reduce cost, risk, time, and to improve the performance of the private investment. Tamaulipas is quickly becoming the best place to do business between the south of the Texas border. And as a part of the energy policy and the master development plan, some short-term opportunities that should be highlighted are in the exploration and the operation of new oil wells, the expectation of 4 port terminals in Altamira to twice their current size, the construction of new platform logistic facilities, and various others. This has been possible thanks to the existence of a master development plan that secures long-term development through fostering and strengthening the Texas-Tamaulipas economic corridor. Its connectivity, logistics potential supported by a port system as a great device force, responsible managing the ability of natural resources and strategic exploration in public location to create a world-class energy hub. Tamaulipas offers a new investment in realizing a window to the future of our region, its potential prosperity, security, and welfare. I can assure you that this strategy is unique in its kind. My duty as a governor is to create favorable climate for doing business, create jobs, and bring in prosperity of all. That's why my top priority are security and economic development. I hope that many of you will visit my state. I know you will notice the difference between what you have heard before of Tamaulipas and what we are doing right now. In other words, Tamaulipas is open for business. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for your visit to the Baker Institute. Let's now have a conversation. I'll start with a few questions, and then we'll open it to the audience, and I'm sure you guys will have your own questions. Let me start with a kind of a difficult question. I know your vision for Tamaulipas. I'm aware, and by the way, I can say that I think Governor Garcia Cabeza de Vaca is one of the few leaders today in Mexico that exhibits a long-term vision. We suffer from, I think, an excess of leaders without strategies. Lots of tactics, lots of short-term moves and cheap scoring, but long-term vision leaders are few and far between, almost on both sides of the border, really. But I know you're thinking long-term for Tamaulipas. But you do have a federal government that's difficult to work with.
Yes, it is.
And they have a different vision. They have a different style. They have a different understanding of politics. So how are you dealing with the federal government? Will you be able to do what you need to do for Tamaulipas in the relationship with Texas with this federal government?
Well, we're trying to do so. Starting with the security issues, most of the strategy that has been made is being made by the state government. Like I mentioned, one of them that has worked real well is that the relationship that we have with 7 federal agencies here in the United States. Like I mentioned, we realized that the problem is not only in one side, it's in both sides of the border. So we share information, we target those criminals, and that has helped us a whole lot. We didn't do that with the help of the federal government in Mexico. We did it, by our own. And not only that, we did quite a few changes. We increased the number of our police force. We trained them. We gave them all the equipment that they needed. And this is the second highest paid police force in all Mexico. Those are the things that had helped a whole lot. And also we work together with the Plan Merida. They have trained some of our police officers, also the Fiscalía General de Justicia. How do you say that, Fiscalía?
The Attorney General's office?
The Attorney General's office, the local ones. Those have been working together also with the American Embassy and the Merida trade. And those are the things that have helped us a whole lot. But when you talk about the security issues, there has to be a will. That's the first thing. If there's not a will in order to change things, to go after the criminals, the organized crime, things that will not advance. So we have been doing all those things, and we have reduced the crime rates in a dramatic way. That has created something that you cannot buy with all the money in the world. That has to do with the trust, that the companies, that investors may have. Everyone's thinking, where do I put my money? Why would I put it in this state or this other state or this country if there's no security?
That's what we have been working to start with. And then regarding with the federal government, let me tell you one thing that probably none of you guys know. Tamaulipas is not all the most important state in the northern part of Mexico. It's also the state that provides, generates more taxes to the federal government just besides Mexico City. So we're doing something right because, you know, everyone's talking about what? Money. They need money for education, for health, for security issues. And Tamaulipas is the one that is providing, you know, most of that money, 275,000 million pesos per year. So that's something that gives us at least a way to tell the federal government, hey, help us out, because we are the ones that are providing most of the money to the federal government. They don't hear that much, but we're still trying to push that idea. And when it comes to the energy sector, we know that they have changed the idea of doing things according to the new energy reform. But since Tamaulipas is the state, the most important state of the energy sector, we're trying to promote the private investors because we know that PEMEX has been doing a good job. But we have areas in other parts of the world which are not far from Tamaulipas, which is in the other side, I'm talking about Texas, that has most of the experience, especially in non-conventional drilling, you know. And we had put up different examples. In Mexico, in all Mexico, when they drill the oil, they generate 1,750,000 barrels of oil per day. That's what they're producing right now. Just in the other side of the border, on this side, they're producing 2 million. We're talking about only the Eagle Ford. And we put that example. In other words, we say, hey, if they have the experience, if they have the technology, let's use it. Let's use it in order to produce more oil, more gas. And that has been a big debate. Obviously, Tamaulipas is promoted it. And hopefully, the federal government will understand that. And hopefully, the Texas companies will come and join us and invest in Tamaulipas.
So let me bring this down to a very specific issue, which is shale, because a lot of the audience are probably people who work in the energy industry. The government is sending mixed messages, and then there's a reality in the rhetoric and a reality on the ground. On the one hand, the government has said no shale. On the other hand, Pemex does do shale. They call it something else, hydraulic fracturing or whatever it is that they call it. But they do it, and they've actually been kind of expanding that a little bit. But they don't call it shale so that they don't have to deal with the rhetoric and their own trap. And Tamaulipas has the largest known shale reserves, the Burgos Basin. So how are you going to navigate selling this to the federal government, to the industry, calling it something else, using different rhetoric, planning for the long term? How do you navigate this labyrinth of rhetoric and reality in the politics? And so I think this would be of a great interest to the audience here.
Well, what I would say is that basically it's happening right now. They're using it. Pemex is using it. I know they're real scared of using the word fracking, which I appreciate if you guys don't use it when you go over there, because they're scared of the government. But non-conventionals, you know, stimulation, hydraulic stimulation, that's the way we're going to call it from now on over there.
Hydraulic stimulation.
Hydraulic stimulation. That will work, believe me, that's going to work. And sooner or later, they're going to open up, because that's the new technologies. They have work here in Texas. They're basically the same areas, It doesn't stop at the Rio Grande. It goes all the way to Tamaulipas. And they're using it right now. Also, there's some companies that are using it right now, and I strongly believe that it's going to be increasing daily, as the time goes by.
Great. Let me also bring it to a very specific project that I know you have. As you mentioned, you have one of the deep water seaports in Mexico, Altamira, but you want a second port,
Yeah.
Matamoros, which is just below Brownsville, Texas. Isn't it better to just grow Altamira and expand that, or do you think that the state needs a second port? How do you see the market for that port in the future, the funding, and the vision that you have for making Tamaulipas really a major seafaring state?
Tony, I'm talking also about a third port. I'm going to explain it real quick. There's the Matamoros port, which is controlled by the state of Tamaulipas. And then we have the API, which is the federal port in Altamira. But inside that port, the state has 3,000 acres, which we have created a state port, which is going to be able to increase the movement of companies to be established there. So it's going to be a third port, one inside the other, but owned by the state, which is basically what we're promoting right now, because we have it there, okay, and there's a lot of companies that are interested in getting this, doing some investments in that area. And what we see is that they don't compete with each other. First of all, but because the one in Matamoros is going to supply all the demand and the needs of the exploration and extraction of oil and gas that's going to be in the deep waters in Cinturón Plegado Perdido, which is closest to Matamoros. Right. And then the one in Altamira, and now the state port, which is inside of that one, is going to supply and give some other services to other companies. So we don't think that they're going to compete with each other. So we have those three ports that are going to help the logistics, of all the companies that are going to be established there.
Well, let me ask you a question about security, because we've been working on that for a while. And I know you've made progress in reducing the homicide rates.
That's right.
And I know firsthand that many people in Tamaulipas are satisfied with the increased public safety and security in the state. But how can you ensure that these gains are permanent, that the rule of law in Tamaulipas increases even beyond your term, and that the rule of law and fighting criminals in Tamaulipas also is scrupulous in ensuring that human rights and due process rights are respected and that the right institutions are put in place under these constraints? And I say that because I've read in the papers, for example, that the state police has sometimes exceeded its use of violence and things like that. So how can you at once work on the security issue and provide rule of law that also applies to the state police forces?
Well, in order for that policy to continue, I need to get reelected. But that's not possible. That's not possible. So I'm just going to be there for 6 years, 3 more years. But if that policy continues, if the entrepreneurs and the society continues those policy, things are going to get better every day. It's not a matter of a governor, to continue that. The society has to be involved. And so far, I'm really proud of the people of Tamaulipas that have been getting involved. The companies, the entrepreneurs, all the people are getting involved, so they are demanding not only the state, for the federal government also to intervene and do their job. So I strongly believe if this policy, the one we're doing in Tamaulipas, I'm not talking about anywhere else in Mexico, but the one we're doing in Tamaulipas, if that continues, things are going to be also getting better every day.
One quick question about immigration. I mean, Tamaulipas shares a long border with Texas, and President Lopez Obrador has bent over backwards to accommodate the immigration policies of the Trump administration by sealing the southern border. But Tamaulipas continues to see these waves of immigrants. How are you dealing with the issue of refugee seekers, immigrants, and also ensuring that they don't have a bad experience in the state, but at the same time working to resolve that problem with the federal government, within the state, and on and on? I mean, this is a very thorny issue that's ongoing, and I think it's going to probably get worse in 2020 because we have an election in the United States, and I'm sure this will be an issue between the two countries, and Tamaulipas, almost by definition, because you are the closest point to southern Mexico along the border. How are you working that with the U.S., the Mexican federal government, and within the state?
Thank you, Tony. Let me just point out, explain a little bit how all this started. It started with a new policy by the federal government that mentioned that their immigration policy was going to be open doors. Obviously, many of the governors, including myself, told the president that that wasn't going to help because a lot of people were going to try to use Mexico in order, with that new policy in Mexico, we're going to use our states in order to try to go all the way to the United States. So we mentioned it, and the idea of the federal government was, well, that's not going to happen. We're going to have problems because we're going to invest a lot of money in Central America. And we said, I don't think that's going to happen. Even though if you invest money, the people, they don't want to stay there. I mean, their main goal is to go through to the United States. So we mentioned it. Anyways, they didn't put too much attention. And then, you know what happened. You know, those caravans started to come in. They couldn't stop them. And they had to use a new agency has been created for the safety of the Mexican families, which is the National Guard. The National Guard was not created to stop immigrants. That was not the main reason for the creation of that. Anyways, they got an agreement with the United States, with the federal government, and they decided that they were going to use the National Guard to stop the immigrants. They have been trying to do so in the southern part of Mexico. It's really hard because those people don't go through the bridges. They don't have papers. They just go through the river and go all the way, crossing the different states and going, like you mentioned, to the closest point that they have in order to go to the United States, which is the northern states, in this case Tamaulipas, Nuevo León, and Coahuila, and so forth. So how are we dealing? We're having a real hard time dealing with that. First of all, in the new project that the government has sent to Congress, they didn't put any money, zero pesos, to control the immigrants. They are not building areas in order to support them, to keep them there before they get an appointment with the judge in order to claim to be in order to be accepted in the United States. So we're having a big problems with that because the federal government has not put money into it. So what we're doing with our force, we're trying to help out in order to keep them in the south part of the state, making sure they don't go all the way to the border. But it's real hard because that's something that has to be controlled by the federal government because immigration by law has to be in charge by the federal government.
That's a federal issue.
That's right.
I have a couple other questions, but I think we should open it to a conversation with the audience. Right here, first hand, and then here. Yep.
Thank you, Governor. Jose Luis Lopez from Next Global Center. How is dealing the state with its approach from Mexico and other agencies and the lack of federal support for economical promotion overseas?
Thank you. But Mexico was an area that had been working real well through the years for the last 25 years because they were promoting all the tourist areas that we have in different parts of the country, I mean, on the world. And not only that, they were promoting the commerce, you know, and investors to come. This new policy that this new federal government made of closing all those offices, I think has hurt, you know, the part of the economy, especially in the tourism area. So what we did is 9 governors got together. We have an organization that is called GOAN, which is the Association of the Pan Political Party. There are 9 governors. We got together and we said, let's promote our states. And that's what we're doing right now. As a matter of fact, there was an event in Spain, you know, that our secretaries of tourism went to that place to promote the areas, tourism areas that we have in different places, including Quintana Roo, you know, one of the best beaches in the world, Baja California Norte, La Paz, Los Cabos, and so forth, Tamaulipas, obviously. So that's what we're doing right now. We didn't like that decision they made because we strongly believed that ProMexico was one of the main instruments that the federal government and the states could use to promote their states.
Right here.
Hola, Gobernador. My name is Cordero Lopez. I'm a student here at Rice. I'm a sophomore. So this is going to be a little bit more of like a broader kind of question overall on relationships between the United States and Mexico. So I, like you, am from McAllen. I went to Cherry Hill High School and now I'm
I
fortunate.
went to Memorial.
Memorial.
Mighty Mustangs.
So there's a good rivalry there actually right now. So I believe that in order to develop all these economic plans, because as I'm sure you already know, the economies between Reynosa and McAllen and the Valley are just merged. They just, people cross all the time and they shop there. But I believe that the key to implementing all these economic plans and investments in Mexico is developing personal relationships between the two groups. And lately, I guess say over the last 36 months or so, relationships, especially the attitude from Mexico and the United States, has understandably turned a little bit sour. I guess my question is, what can leaders in your position, especially in Mexico, do to maintain these personal relationships, and what can I do as a student or as a maturing person who has made it to a higher place of education do to make sure that people still feel welcome here and make sure that I still feel welcome in Mexico?
Thank you. So that's a good question. This has been a big debate through the years regarding the issues that go on the border. And seriously, you gotta live there in order to understand what goes on. There's a lot of commerce. We're not only neighbors, we're our friends, we're allies, and most of all, in many cases, this is something real hard to understand. We're family. Families live in both sides of the border. The same families, you know, and they live out of the international commerce. And the bad decisions that are made in Mexico City and Washington hurt that economy. They made a bad decision, and believe me, it's going to struggle right on the border. So what we have done is we have brought, you know, the politicians that live in Mexico City and Washington, the ones that take the decision, in order for them to understand where really goes on. So what we have done is work together with the mayors in both sides of the border. I was mayor of the city of Reynosa. I worked real close. And we defend, those efforts that we do every day because we do depend on each other. And we don't see the Rio Grande River as something that divides us. We see it as something that unites both areas. And we don't compete with each other. As a matter of fact, we work together in order to improve the quality of lives of the people that live in both sides of the border. So what I would recommend is to keep on working with the authorities, but especially with entrepreneurs, which are the ones that are more interested in working together in order to promote, in this case, the area of Reynosa and the Rio Grande Valley. So far it has been working. Because we fight for the right to promote, that region in order to make sure that what will benefit the people that live in both sides of the border. Here.
Hi, my name is Diana Alvarez. I'm from Shale, Mexico. I'm based in Mexico City. My question would be, you're talking about security. I understand that, for example, Altamira and Tampico are very safe in the state. But how is the relationship with Veracruz? That it's just in the border, and you know that there are very important security issues with the state. So it's very important for a business to know that the whole environment where you're working is safe enough to have your operations. And the other question would be about the Matamoros project. I know it's a mid-term project, I think.
Yes, it is.
Because you will need time to get the yards from all the operators to be there, and you will need time to get all the logistics for everyone to be ready. So I don't know if you're also considering Matamoros like for about 10 years or something. Okay.
Listen, thank you. So that's a good question regarding the situation in the south part of Tamaulipas, which, as a matter of fact, is one of the 5th areas most safest in all Mexico. I'm talking about Tampico, Altamira, and Madero. And
which wasn't always the case, by the way.
No, it wasn't the case. A few years ago, a lot of people had to move out of those areas that were insecure areas. But right now, it's probably one of the safest places to live. The quality of life is real high. That's where the port of Altamira is located. That's why we're promoting it a whole lot. And but going back to the security issues, we have the Pánuco, which is the river that divides Veracruz with Tamaulipas. And Veracruz has the problem that the northern part of Veracruz is not attended by the state government because it's real far from the capital. So what we have been working is real close with the Mexican Marines in order to keep safe that area and make sure that the problems that they have in the other side don't come over here. So we work real close with the Marines. We work with police force, and so far we have been controlling all that area and making sure that the problems stay in the other side of the river. And regarding it's kind of hard. It's kind of hard because it's our neighbor, But it's tough. But they have to do their job. We're doing our job. So we're trying to protect all that area. And so far, it's been working real well. We haven't had any problems in the last 2 years, and that has given the chance for a lot of companies to invest in that area, in the south part of Tamaulipas. And the question about Matamoros is not only a long term. I think it will be a short term investments as well, because there are companies like CB. No, yeah, but the other one that are exploring and extracting, BHP, the Australian company, with its partner with Pemex, they're extracting right now oil, and in order for them to have the services to those platforms, it's better for them to get those services from Matamoros instead of going all the way to Altamira. That's why I mentioned that those two ports, they don't compete. Matamoros is going to give the support and services of Cinturón Plegado Perdido, and then the Port of Altamira is going to supply all the demands and needs that are going to be in the area, in the southern part of Tamaulipas, in the Gulf of Mexico, and the area of Veracruz as well.
Right here, yeah.
Gracias, Gobernador. Adrián Calderon, Market. My question is basically about oil and gas and petrochemicals. So I have one of the things that could potentially stop the development of hydraulic fracturing or is water.
That's right.
What plans, do you have any plans regarding availability of water for Tamaulipas? So in case, thinking long term, and there's a 180 in the administration, that would not stop a further development of fracking in the States, which also is part of the why people are against it. Second is, have you considered the development of Altamira precisely for petrochemical infrastructure with imported raw materials like ethane or propane coming from the US, but the infrastructure being in the Mexican side? Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Hydraulic stimulation. Let's make sure on that because they freak out over there. Anyways, we have a lot of reserve water, but we believe that the new technologies that have been being used, not only in this side, I'm talking about Texas, but worldwide, they don't need as much water as they used to 10 years ago. So that's going to be a plus. So we believe that we won't have that problem. Besides, they're reusing, that water over and over, and those are one of the things that we have been telling the federal government that is they should not be worried, but make sure that there are options to it, okay? And for the other question that has to do with the Altamira, there's so many companies that are building right now those tanks in order to receive diesel and gasolines in the area of Altamira. So that has a lot of potential. As a matter of fact, yesterday we were talking with different companies that are interested in investing in Altamira already. As you all know, most of the diesel and gasolines that Mexico uses right now has to be imported. So what we need is areas to contain them, So right now there are 3 companies interested and 2 others that are building, as we're speaking, the containers in order to receive the gasolines and diesels that are going to be used to distribute all the gasolines in the central part of Mexico.
Let me get 2 or 3 questions real quick to start closing. Here, and here. Let's just take them all together, and then if you need to take, Governor, if you need to take notes, or you have a good memory to take 3 or 4 questions at once, go ahead.
Just a quick follow-up. I'm Alberto Diaz. I'm from Tampico. Then I'm really concerned about the security of the area. Then I want just a follow-up of the past question is, how do you convince a federal institution like the Navy to actually keep safe only the side of like the Altamira, Pico, Madero region? I know the importance of it in the economy, etc., but how do you convince a federal institution to actually just cover this part and keep it safe?
Next, right here. Yep.
Thank you. With the risk of sounding a bit repetitive, I wanted to insist on the reports. If you could share with us a bit more on the details, if there's a timeline for the completion of these projects, if there's or if you could share with us the percentage of investment that has been completed, and also Tamaulipas is mainly on the upstream side, but you also have the refinery there, the Madero refinery. I wanted to know how's been the relationship with the federal government in Madero. I know that it's been recently ramping up in its production, and most of the economy in Madero depends on the refinery. So wanted to know your plans. once we've jumped into the downstream, I wanted to know your opinion on the Dos Bocas refinery.
Yeah, sure. Yep,
That's a tough one.
right here.
Good morning, Governor. My name is Conrad Mueller from Impex. We produced gas actually in Tamaulipas until last year, and we will be exploring in Cinturón Plegado Perdido next year, hopefully. And
What company, I'm sorry, Jose?
Conrad from
Conrad, oh yeah.
We, our concern is, if you want to develop the full potential of the resources in the region, you need to open up for new rounds. And I understand that perhaps your new agency is not capable of pursuing those new rounds. So how do you see that relationship going, and how likely do you think that opportunity will rise up again?
And last question, right here.
Yes, thank you for joining us today, and I'm a geologist. You mentioned the Burgos Basin. Northernmost Tamaulipas is closer to the wind farms in West Texas than Houston is. They have surplus electricity. Interested?
Of course we are.
All right. Well, good.
Okay. I'm just gonna, I will start with Alberto Diaz. He asked me about how do we convince the Marines in order to help us out with the security issues. First of all, my secretary of the police force is a Marine, so that helps out. And a lot of the officers that are in my police force are Marines as well. Some of them are retired, but that gives us an advantage in order for the communication with the Mexican Marines. But besides that, there's an area that is located in Madero, which covers all the responsibility that the Marines have in the Gulf of Mexico. It's located right in Madero, and in the other side of the river El Pánuco, which is Veracruz, the ones in charge of the security area is other sector of the Marines, which are located in the center of Veracruz. So basically, we didn't have to convince them. They were their job. What is happening is that we're working real close, with the authorities, in this case, with the Marines and the Army. And so far, that communication has helped us a whole lot to reduce the crimes in their area. The other question has to do, what was the second one? Oh, you asked me a tough one regarding Dos Bocas. You want me to start on that? I don't have a clue. No. Seriously, it's a tough one because there's a lot of money that's going to be invested. We have 6 refineries so far in Mexico, and they're kind of old, and they're not producing not even 30 or 35% of their capacity. And I strongly believe that money should have been put in Pemex or some other areas to explore or extract the gas and oil instead of building a new refinery, because there's so many refineries right now on the other side of the border, that where we could send our oil and then bring back our gasoline. But it's going to be a lot of money spent in Dos Bocas, and there's some people, the technical, special people that know that area, that believe that it won't work that well. Some other ones say that it's going to work, but it has been a big debate, through all this month. So we're just going to have to wait and see if it works or not. Okay. The other question, it was you, regarding the, help me out?
Rounds.
Oh, the rounds. Well, the rounds were made before the end of the last federal administration. They were given. We're strongly in favor of those because there's a lot of reserves of the gas and all on those areas. This new government made some changes in la Comisión Nacional de Hidrocarburos, and they decided to put a pause on that. But the ones that, some of them that were given, they're starting to work on that, not only in deep waters, but also in land. And the way I see it is that they're going to open up. I mean, they have to open up because we need the gas, we need the oil, and if Pemex and the federal government does not have the money in order to invest, which they don't, also the new energy reform gives you the opportunity to do joint ventures between Pemex and the private sector and do those exploration extractions of oil and gas. So I strongly believe that is going to happen. I would say sooner than later. Seriously, because we need it. We need it. There's some things that, in my case, I have talked to the president. I told him, sir, we need those investments. We need the gas. We need the oil. It's there. It's ours. If we don't have the money, let the private sector invest, and we don't have to go that far. I told him those exact words, sir. We don't have to go that far. We have the experience in the other side of the border. Texas has all the experience. There's small and medium companies that we're more than willing to invest over there if the federal government, the Mexican federal government, give them all the tools to do so. Okay, and if we're interested in wind energy, we're producing right now wind energy. As a matter of fact, we have the largest plant in Reynosa, the biggest one in all Latin America, not competing with the States, but we have it right in Reynosa. This year, 5 more areas are going to be opened up, and we're really excited. We have the best wind in all Mexico. Seriously, no, we do, because everyone talks about Oaxaca, but the problem with Oaxaca is the winds are too hard, and the new technologies, which are the largest, how do you call it, blades, cannot be installed there. So a lot of the companies are getting established here in Tamaulipas. The only problem that we have right now is with the conduction and the transmission. We need more of those. For some reason, this new government says that they don't want to build more. And we said, okay, if you don't want to build more, let the private sector do so. That way, more plants, wind plants can be built. So we're pushing it. We're pushing it, and hopefully more of these are going to be built in Tamaulipas.
Governor, I want to end with one question, which is, I think, an important one and an obligated question for somebody with a vocation for politics like you. There's no re-election in Tamaulipas. You'll be done in 2.5, 3 years. What's next for you? And how do you convince, especially because you've accumulated so much expertise, experience, talent, and knowledge on how to deal with these issues. So what comes next for you, and how do you convince the Mexican electorate to correct the course of the country and reconsider current politics?
Well, there's a difference between what I want to do and what I am going to do. First of all, I wish I could come to Houston and see the Texans win for the first time the Super Bowl. I'd love to see that and to do that, but that's going to be next year, hopefully.
I mean, you were rewarded. Your work was rewarded last year with what? You won 22 out of 21 districts in your state. So the Tamaulipecos are convinced.
Yes,
How do you carry that message beyond Tamaulipas and say, hey, in Tamaulipas, what I'm doing is working. This can work in the rest of the country?
Well, set up the Tamaulipas as an example is something that we need to promote in every state in Mexico. Things can change in the security issues, in economics matter, and what we're trying to do is work together with other governors. You know, politics. And policies that we have established in Tamaulipas, they're doing it in other states, and things that have been working in other states are we're trying to transfer them to Tamaulipas. But it has. I'm going to wait. I'm going to wait 2 more years to answer that question. Okay.
Well,
but
great.
What I'm trying to say is that things can change for the better. You know, and Tamaulipas is a good example. It's not only the policies that the governor has applied, but it is the atmosphere, it's the entrepreneurs, it's the people that are gotten involved, and we have gained something, like I mentioned, that money cannot buy. That's the trust. And that's something that we're trying to expand in the rest of Mexico, getting the trust, the confidence of the people, and that I strongly believe that will make a difference.
Thank you very much. Please help me thank the governor. Thank you, Governor. My pleasure.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.